Welcome to Very Special Coworking, a podcast about what makes coworking special. And this month's guest is Justin Powers from Kernville Cowork in California. The interesting thing about Justin is that I met him. He met him on LinkedIn looking at a co-working event in Canada. So I expected him to be in Canada, and then he was like, "Oh, I'm from California." I'm like, you went a long way. Oh, maybe the event was live. Justin will talk more about this. And what I really like about Justin and about what he was talking at that Canadian Working Conference is that he's in the middle of nowhere. Always like when it's the middle of nowhere. Maybe he's going to say, there's a lot of activities going on here. I'm pretty sure, for example, I love kayaking, but whatever. We'll talk about kayaking later. And and I love what's a bit different, what's a bit atypical. And I believe when you're in a rural area, a smaller town, maybe even the countryside, you're not the typical co-working space that is in a big city. So I want to talk more about this, about people starting those kind of crazy project, because I believe just a normal co-working space is crazy enough. So in a rural space, it's even more even crazier. So, Justine, thank you for being with us this month.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Fanny. Appreciate being able to come on the show.
I was saying that well, it's a crazy idea, but I was also saying that maybe this it's a middle of nowhere. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Is there so much activity going around in Kernville?
I was talking to somebody about what the definition of rural is. Everybody
Mm,
has a different definition, and my favorite
yes.
one is it's always somewhere smaller than you are. So if you live
Ooh.
in a big city, the rural is like that little town that's a little bit outside the city. If you're in that little
Hmm.
town, then it's the people that are up in the hills. If you're up in the hills, it's that person. Rural means that person that's like way out there on his own little like homestead, right? So yeah, we're definitely rural. If you're wanting to get to the next large town that has all the larger shopping chains and all that, you have to go about an hour to an hour and a half. So we're for a little more context, we're in Southern California, up in the heart of the Sierra Nevadas. We're surrounded by the Sequoia National Forest, and the Sequoia National Park is just north of us. We've got the Kern River flows right through this area, and I refer to a lot as the Kern River Valley as this area that we live in.
Hmm.
In fact, I can walk across the street and go whitewater kayaking on my lunch break, and none of my coworkers would know the difference. And then we've got Lake Isabella is right here, and that's what the community is centered around, is around the
Yeah,
lake and the
so
river.
very surrounded by beautiful nature. And it makes so much sense what you were saying because I remember, so one of my first job was in Brussels. It's the capital of Belgium, my home country. And I was working with Parisians there, so people coming from Paris, and they were saying how refreshing Brussels is because it's not as big as Paris, so it's a bit more chill. And I was laughing so hard because my uncle at that time was coming from Bastogne, so it's really in the forest, like small town in the forest. And he was going to Liège, my hometown, which is a city smaller than Brussels, but still a city, and saying how stressful it was, and that he
Mhm.
couldn't even think about going to live in Brussels because how stressful it would be. I was working with those people from Paris saying Brussels is so much so chill compared to Paris. So it's as you're saying, it depends on where you're coming from, actually. Um, but
Totally,
I
totally.
I guess when you, how long have you been doing managing co-working in Kernville?
Um, so actually, our soft opening was middle of February 6 years ago. So we're right about our 6 year anniversary.
Yeah.
And we've been in this particular building for about 3 years now.
Okay. So you decided to change at some point.
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting in a small town because
Hmm.
um, if even if you are familiar with co-working, which back in 2018 it was out there, but
Mm.
it wasn't super mainstream. But nobody comes to a small mountain town and expects to see a co-working space. So whether you're a local or whether you're coming in to visit, nobody's nobody's Googling for co-working. Nobody's if you need a place to work, you look up a coffee shop. And
Hmm.
so our first building, I really loved the layout and I really loved the vibe, but it wasn't visible. Nobody would drive past it. So now our new
Yeah.
location, it's smaller and it's cozy, but we're right on the main street, and so everybody it becomes kind of the center of town, which is really cool because that's really what we want to be. Is we want to be kind of the cornerstone of the business community here.
Yeah, I imagine all businesses are at some kind of the center, like in the main road or just next to it. And
Mhm.
that's about it. And if you want to be seen, you need to be there because that's where people stop for shopping and look around and will notice you.
Absolutely, yeah. In fact, one of the reasons that we built
Hmm.
this co-working space, and there's a number of reasons,
Yes.
but one of them is we wanted to take people because this is one of the main economic drivers in this area is tourism, especially the whitewater industry.
Hmm.
And so we wanted to take people that would normally be able to come up for 2 or 3 days, but if they had
Hmm.
a place to work out of, maybe they spend 10 days or 20 days, and then maybe eventually they'll look around and say, why am I driving back to my sardine can? Why not live here and work here and play here, spend my money here, but still get my paycheck from
Yeah.
LA, San Francisco,
Interesting.
Silicon Valley? So what that's done is by being on the main stretch, everybody is coming up to camp, everybody is coming up to go whitewater, everybody is coming up to check out the local businesses. They see our as they're coming around the corner, our signs like right in front of them, so they can't miss it. So we've ended up getting a lot of business, a lot of day passes from people coming in. They're just
Hmm.
like, "Oh man, I was trying to figure out how I was going to do my last meeting before I
Yeah.
started my weekend." So we get a lot of
That's
that
totally what
actually.
I'm thinking. Some people might think, okay, I want to go for the weekend starting on Friday, but I have that meeting. So I have to take that meeting. But maybe my partner and the kids, they can go do something else while I have that meeting. But I
Exactly.
need somewhere, not a coffee shop, somewhere to have it. And that's where you come in.
Yeah, and we get a lot of people that they'll drive up their RVs or their trailers and they think, "Oh,
Hmm.
I'll just work out of my trailer for a few days." And they realize once they get up here and they've got the kids running in and out and they've got the spouse that's in there
Yeah.
doing things, they realize that they really need a spot to work. So we definitely uh it's it's been one of those things where you have an idea that something's going to happen a certain way, and certainly not all of our like theories have worked out, but
Yeah.
this is a good example of one that like it has come to pass that we thought that we would see this and we are, and so that's been really cool.
Yeah, yeah. Just to come back, so you're saying you started in 2018, but that you don't usually see a co-working space, so people would know and usually knew about co-working space before, but not so much in a small town. What gave you the idea to start one? Because
Yeah,
you could have thought that it wouldn't work because there's no market for it.
yeah, and in rural co-working, yeah, I think in Europe that rural co-working had a lot gotten a lot further by that point, and in Canada as well. Here in the United States, we weren't seeing as much, and I didn't even know about it. I had a friend who was starting a co-working space, or I had a friend who was doing a lot of projects down in Bakersfield, and I was talking to him one day, and he said, "Oh, we're going to start a co-working space." I said, "What's a co-working space?" And so he introduced me to the concept, and they started Mesh Co-work in Bakersfield. It's still going. I love that place, and I try to support them however I can. Um, and I saw what it was. I saw what it could do, and it really seemed to me that that co-working could be the vehicle for the kind of change that I wanted to see in the community that I live in. And
Mhm.
I'm the seventh generation of my family live in this area, so
Okay.
this was
That
just a
was my
way
next
of kind of
question.
shaking
Have
things
you
up.
always been living there and had projects for your town and co-working became part of it? Or did you come here for co-working or let me know.
Yeah, yeah. So I was born and raised here. I moved out. I lived in
Hmm.
Sacramento for about 10 years, which
Hmm.
is also in California. But for those that don't understand the scale, I can drive at freeway speed from here to Sacramento. It takes about 6 hours, so it's a good ways away. Um, and I lived there for about 10 years, and I ended up getting this really great remote job doing web development. And I could live anywhere I wanted to, and me and my wife looked at a lot of different places. We looked at a lot of different options, a lot of different states, and I couldn't think of anywhere where you could have the same kind of outdoor opportunities here because we've got, like I mentioned, world-class whitewater, world-class mountain biking,
Hmm.
rock climbing, fly fishing, hiking, camping,
So
lake
very
sports.
big for outdoor activities
There's
and tourism.
so much.
Hmm.
So yeah, so we moved back, and I had been moved back for a few years when we decided to, I was just sitting there working working in my little home office, looking out my
Hmm.
window at this playground that we have, and thinking, man, wouldn't it be great if more people had access to this? And
Yeah.
so that was kind of the start of it. Wanted to create more opportunities, wanted to create a place where remote workers, that are working for different companies but doing the same type of work where they could really get to connect to each other and get that water cooler talk that you miss out on when you're working remotely. There's kind of a lot of reasons for it, but it was it really came um, out of really loving the place where I live and wanting to
Hmm.
find a way of helping to improve the place that I live.
Yeah. Yeah. But I'm thinking you could have done something for tourists again because co-working is a bit in the middle. You were talking about before how people can come a bit longer, discover the place, and maybe think about moving out. So there's also this idea of appealing to future locals and
Hmm.
increasing the community, isn't there?
Yeah, and that's been something that's been really interesting. Again, we had this theory that it would cause people to move up here, and that we would be serving our future locals. I like the way you put that. And we've been seeing it every single summer. It's always interesting at the end of the summer to see how many people stick around because they found a community that they fell in love with, and they realize that they can work here and that there are other people that work here the same way they do, and that they can connect with these people. And so that's been really cool. And yeah, there's other things we could have done, but in terms of really getting at the heart of some of the change we want to see in this area, because like I said, the
Hmm.
economy is very tourism dependent, and a lot of that is whitewater. And but lately, with climate change and with some of these
Yeah.
really really long droughts, when there's not snow on the mountains, then there's not water in the river. And when there's not water in the river, our economy really really suffers. And
Yeah.
so by bringing up more of these people that are getting importing their paychecks from outside of the valley,
Mm,
the idea is that that's going to help provide a little bit more of an economic base, and it's going to
mm.
create a foundation for maybe some startups, maybe some other types of activity that aren't so dependent on um,
Developing other
the snow on the
industries,
mountains.
not being as dependent on
Exactly.
climate as you are adapting
Yeah.
fittest. Yeah, great. No, that's really often a co-working starts with your own experience. As you were saying, you look through the windows and you're like, oh, this is such a great view. I would love to make it available for more people. And that's good enough for a reason, but you went beyond and thought about your work community and the work life there and how it's going to be in the future. Because as you're saying, you cannot just depend on one industry. You have to diversify your investment, huh? So, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
totally. So that was the goal. And at the beginning, you started in 2018. You were saying you have a peak in some months and some people stick around the rest of the year. And how has it evolved until now? I guess there was that huge change with all the lockdowns and everything. Was it a good a silver lining for you or not so much?
Well, yeah, it's so complicated because there's so many ups
Variables.
and downs through all
Oh,
that.
yeah.
One thing is I was telling everybody that would listen that look,
Hmm.
you don't have to live where you work anymore. Now we live in an age
Mm,
where you can work where you want to live.
yes.
I've been telling people I'm a really good evangelist because I've been telling everybody this, and then all of a sudden at the beginning of 2020, everybody figured it out at the same time. So I'm going to take credit for that one. Um, but so it was really helpful in that the people really started to understand remote work. or at
Mhm.
least become more accustomed to it. Nobody was doing remote work the right way, and that's what led to a lot of burnout. That's what led to a lot
That's
of
what I was saying. It's not remote work, it's work under quarantine. And it's totally different. It's like you were
yes,
saying, working from your mobile home, or I don't know how you call it, and you imagine how it's going to be, and then you imagine yourself at home working with your spouse, with your kids. It's not going to work because
yeah.
it's a big mess.
Yeah, and so, but at the very least, people got
Hmm.
introduced to it. They figured out that it was possible, and they also learned about other ways of doing work, like co-working. And so, all of a sudden, I went from 2019. Everybody that walked in the door, I had to explain to them what co-working was every single time
Yeah,
almost. And then
I know that.
post-pandemic, all of a sudden, everybody understood, and so now we're starting the conversation
Yeah.
with, oh, great, you understand it. Now let's talk about how you connect with it.
Hmm.
It was certainly a hard time for everybody. We had a few essential workers, and so here in California, essential workers could work in an office, and we put them like 20 feet apart, and we had all sorts of safeguards.
Hmm.
Um, but even our members that weren't coming in were still paying. Nobody stopped their memberships,
Wow.
which was really helpful for us. That's the only way that we made it through. Um, and and yeah, it's part of being in a tourist town is like COVID was certainly a roller coaster, but then every summer and every winter is a roller coaster because we become very full in the summer. We get a lot of people that
Yeah.
just move up for the summer. We have a lot of people that will come up and work as whitewater
Hmm.
raft guides on the weekends, but during the week they're accountants and marketers. It's a really interesting phenomenon. Um, but then during the winter, everybody kind of, the economy slows down, people's incomes slow down, and all of a sudden we're trying to really make it work. And we're a very, very tiny co-working space, so we're only 1,300 square feet here. I wish I could convert that to square meters in my head, but I can't.
I wish to, but I never able to do it. I still have issue with inches, and my computer is in inches, but that's all I know. And
Yeah, yeah.
how many people can be in the room?
We're feeling pretty full at about 15 or 16 people, so it's not a very
Hmm.
big space. Um, and we are working on the next stage is we're going to be building a much larger community hub that's going to have a lot more space.
Hmm.
Hold on one second. I have something that's not muted. There we go. So we are working on that. So for us,
Yes.
the fluctuation between summer and winter is pretty drastic when it comes to like
Yeah.
our revenue for sure.
Hmm. Hmm. I'm just thinking out loud. Have you thought about having a temporary space during summer? Or is that
Y-
something not possible because everything is full in summer anyway?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I I think we've been able to make it work. It usually ends up being like a few days per summer where I'm taking some of my most like loyal and most forgiving members and asking them to like work on the couch or like share a table in the conference room.
Yeah.
Um, but that doesn't happen very often. But given our momentum, we may end up needing that in the we may end up needing that this next summer
Or a very
for
big
sure.
terrace,
Yes.
if the weather allows it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's there's certain seasons here that'd be really nice to work outside. That's something that we're kind of working towards. We would love to have some outdoor working space.
I think it was in Portugal I had that. So half the co-working was outside in the big courtyard, and half was inside in an old house with so many seats it could have, and it was getting full at some point, and everybody was outside because on big banks and stuff like that.
Oh, I love
So
it.
yeah. It was very barbecue-ish kind of co-working.
Nice, nice.
And
Yeah, I
that's
love that.
no, it was good with a lot of plants and stuff like that. I love plants. Uh, So that's today. What about the future? Well, we already talk about that. Maybe new space, maybe new project. But do you have something else you'd like to do?
Yeah, that's actually really exciting for me to talk about. I've been spending most of my time talking about the new project, so I'm
Yes.
really excited about it. So, Kernville Cowork, we are a for-profit, and we started as in the United States as an LLC, a limited liability company, which is like
Hmm.
the simplest for-profit you can have. Um, and we we've always we built a co-working space for a mission because there's change we wanted to see in the community, but we didn't start a nonprofit because of just the overhead that it takes to get it set up and it takes to run it and all
Mm.
that. We weren't even sure, like nobody was doing rural co-working. Nobody in our area had heard about it, so we didn't know if it was going to work.
Yeah, so it was
So
a lot of administrative and legal burden. So you chose the easy, fast option to try it out.
yes.
Mm.
So and so we've been doing this for about 6 years. We've seen the impact it can have on our local economy. We've seen the impact it can have on small
Hmm.
businesses and startups, for entrepreneurs, for solopreneurs is a really great resource. So we've created a nonprofit. The name of the nonprofit is Sierra Shared Spaces, and what we're looking to do is to take this model of rural co-working that has been working out for us, and we want to first scale it up a bit because our space here is just much too small to be sustainable, especially if you're taking it to other communities. And then we also want to take it to other communities. So the first step is we're building a community hub on the other side of Lake Isabella, which from here is about a 20-minute drive, and um, that is going to have a lot more elements incorporated into it because in a small town we don't get a lot of resources. We don't have access to a lot of resources the big cities are going to have, and so rather than just focusing on it as a co-working space, we wanted to encompass a lot of the other needs that the community has. So we'll have the shared open co-working space. We'll have the private offices. We'll have some anchor tenants that are going to help subsidize the whole thing. Organizations that impact our area but currently don't have a footprint here, and so we want
Hmm.
them to bring their offices here, bring some jobs here.
Mm.
And then we're looking at what else we can have. We want to have a large, well lit event center with natural light, which is something we don't have up here.
Yeah.
We want to bring in, we're looking at a shared commercial kitchens for food startups and for cooking classes. We're talking about
Wow.
video production space, artist studios, a community garden, um, a lot of training rooms for job training, career training. Um, we're looking at bringing a lot in, and so that's our big project we're working on right now.
Yeah.
So we've created a startup. We're working on some grant funding. We're working on finding some corporate sponsors. So if there's anybody that's interested in joining us, the name of the nonprofit is Sierra Shared Spaces. We're in the planning phase right now. And I think this is going to be an excellent model that we can take to other rural communities and help them kind of figure out how to do a different style of community-led economic development that we're not seeing a lot of, at least here in the States.
Yeah, yeah, that's really amazing. I'm thinking because if you open co-working not to just office work, but as you were saying, some kind of lab, some kind of kitchen, some kind of studio, that could work for a lot of different industries. And you might partner with other communities or government or nonprofit
Mm.
or all kind of different organization actually.
Absolutely, absolutely. So it's a really exciting time, a really exciting place.
Mm.
For those for those that end up following us on LinkedIn, it looks a little bit strange right now because we're doing a community fundraiser right now, and
Mm.
it's actually a fundraiser that's been an annual tradition now for I think over 60 years. They've been doing this fundraiser, so we've joined this fundraiser
Hmm.
in it's called the Whiskey Flat Mayor Campaign, and we're raising money for the community hub. But as part of that,
Yes.
I'm getting in crazy costume, or I'm in character as an old West miner, gold miner, and doing crazy things like coal plunges and stuff to try and raise money for this project.
So yeah, it can be very fun in the end.
Yeah, it's fun. It's a lot of fun.
No, no, that's great. That's great. I'm thinking. Hmm. You were talking about maybe one last question because before we wrap it up a bit. Uh, you were talking about how small the space is, and it's different than big spaces in the cities, right? I think
Hmm.
we talked about it before, and you were saying you're managing the space part time, something like that. So you have your main job, and then you have the space.
Absolutely. And so for the last 6 years, for the most part, there's been a
Hmm.
couple of instances where we've been able to have an intern or a part time help. But for the most part, I've been a web developer. I've been working as a project manager of sorts. Um, and then just managing the space while I'm here. For a fairly small space, I can still give tours and manage the members, and the members really help keep the space clean and keep it running. Um, but it is a totally different style. I hate to use the word business model because co-working as a business model isn't really what we're
Mm.
focused on. We're focused on co-working as the movement or as a verb. But it is very different, and so that's another reason for wanting to really scale up is that
Hmm.
it's really hard to make the economics work in such a small scale. And
Hmm.
we're having to be really creative. We're creative with events. We're creative with virtual mailbox programs, with some other revenue sources. Um, but at the end of the day, if we really want this thing to be viable long term, then we need to be able to have full time staff, and so we need to go a little
Hmm.
bit bigger. I think, like I mentioned, we're at 1,300 square feet. If I was to start over again, I don't think I would, even in a small town. I think I would probably try and find a space of about 4,000 square feet,
Hmm.
just to make it a little bit more viable, and so that we could have
Hmm.
enough revenue to be able to pay for some employees, or at least one
Yeah.
employee.
So this a minimum size you believe to be sustainable and to be able to have enough members and.
Yeah, and every community is
Hmm.
different, and
Hmm.
it also depends on if you're able to find a landlord that's willing to work with you. If assuming that the rent is a
Yeah.
large part of your expenses, but for us and which where we're at currently, and kind of the rent in this area, about 4,000 is about where we would need to be.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and it's pretty amazing. I've seen so many co-working space where members did not clean around, and the piles of cutlery and plates and cups was going high and high and high in the kitchen, and they try all kind of things to not say discipline people, but try to show a bit more respect to everybody. But when you have a bigger size space, maybe it's more difficult. So that's one of the perks of having a
Oh, absolutely.
small space with everybody is involved actually in the project. Mm.
Absolutely, yeah. It's really easy to get to know the people you're working with and become
Mm-hmm.
friends. And
Mm.
sometimes in a larger space, you can walk in, and the other people that are there may you know if obviously if there's a good community manager there, they're going to greet you and they're going to make you part of what's happening. But it's easy to walk in and not really know who else in there is like a regular or who's just visiting, and it may not be easy to make those connections. But here, if one of our members sees somebody they don't recognize, they'll come up and introduce themselves and they'll get to know them. And
Yeah,
it's you get that small town feel. That that's one of the reasons that people love these small towns, is that
yeah.
you can have those personal connections. And I love that we're able to translate that into the co-working space as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. No, that's good. It remember me one co-working space where I've been, and I had one big table in the kitchen where everybody would have lunch together, and they didn't have lunch at the same time they used to. But when it was time for lunch, they were getting up and saying, "You want something?" And they were all getting something somewhere, and
Hmm.
just staggered around, and it was in Sweden, a country that's reputed to be a bit cold. And
Mhm.
I felt very, very welcome there because it was a small town. We were about 10 regular and maybe 20 in totals, and
Mhm.
everybody knew each other. Everybody had lunch with each other. And it
Yeah.
was obvious things. So you were
Yeah.
invited over, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's I think that's one of the reasons we picked the spot that we did is because we wanted lunch spots to be within walking distance so that we could say,
Hmm.
oh hey, like there's, maybe in the middle of summer we've
Hmm.
got, 6 regulars and then we've got like 10, visitors. Like, hey, let's all go out to lunch and get to know, like, let's get to know some of these people. And all of a sudden they
Yeah.
feel it's fun to see people walk in expecting just to work on their laptop for a bit, and then all of a sudden, like they get invited out to lunch, and we have great conversations, and they come back, and by the end of the day, they feel like they're local, even though like
Um,
it's their first day, it's
mhm.
their first day in town, and they feel connected to people. They feel like, oh well, now I know the person that owns a lodge over here, and I know the person that does this, and they introduced us to the guy that owns the burger shop that we went and ate at. Like now they have connections to this town that they never really expected to have. They just expected to be able to take their the conference calls that they really needed to take. So it's always fun to see that shift happen, and it's a little
Yeah.
bit of surprise for some people, and that's I love
Mhm.
that. I get so much out of that.
Mm. And it's just not everywhere. I've been in other spaces where it was a bit more informal, and some people maybe look for that. So it's something very special, I believe. Mm. Yeah, that's the name
Absolutely.
of the podcast. Just
Yeah.
saying. Well, we're going at the end. Just before we're closing, I wanted to ask you if there's one last thing you wanted to talk about and we didn't have the chance to yet.
Um. Man, we covered so much good stuff. Um. I think
Hmm.
right now our biggest push is really getting through the planning phase on this community hub, and so
Hmm.
we've got a donation link on our website for the nonprofit, which is sierrashare.space, and I could share that in the chat. Um, and we love support. Obviously, financial support is fantastic, but if anybody else wants to get involved and join and help us kind of figure out how we do this new style of community-led economic development, I'd love to partner with anybody that's interested. Um, and we've for the next 2 weeks, we're running this other fundraiser, so we've got a GoFundMe up for that one, and I can if you go to our again sierrashare.space, you can find those links. Um, and yeah, I think the main thing is just um, we're in this new age of work. Everything about work is
Hmm.
changing, and I think everybody's looking for this like work-life balance.
Mm.
And I can't think of a better way of getting that work-life balance than like right now. Like I said, I could walk across the street and go put my feet in the river. Um, and there's something about that is really, really just healing, um,
Hmm.
and it helps kind of just it creates a more healthy atmosphere for us. So I'd love to just continue that conversation. Anybody wants to reach out, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm Justin Powers on LinkedIn, and feel free to email me, justin@kernvillecowork.com.
Yeah, I guess that's the best way to contact you. Add those links in the comments so that they're easy to find.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you very much, Justin. It was wonderful to talk about all your unique awesomeness. That's really why I'm doing this podcast.
Awesome. I really appreciate it. Thank you for bringing me on.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.